There is something deeply powerful about the decision to step back. It is not an act of giving up, nor is it a sign of defeat. It is instead one of the most radical expressions of trust in the living God. When you choose to step back, you as the chief, you are declaring with your life that the battle does not belong to you. It belongs to the Lord. In the book of Exodus was the chief. When the Israel found themselves trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army, panic broke out. Their backs were against the wall. From the human perspective, it was over. They cried out in fear. But what did Moses say to the people in that moment of crisis? He didn't tell them to fight harder. He didn't tell them to devise a plan of escape. He said, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Stillness, stepping back, silence. That's the battlefield posture of those who truly know their God. This doesn't come naturally to us. Our flesh wants to react. Our pride wants to rise up and prove itself. We want to control, to fix, to force the outcome. But when we step back, we are giving room for the hand of God to move without interference. We are saying, "Lord, I trust your plan more than I trust my emotions. I believe you see what I cannot see. I believe you know the hearts of men, the hidden agendas, and the traps the enemy has laid. And I'm not going to take matters into my own hands." Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is to stop striving, to stop explaining yourself to people who don't want to understand you, to stop pushing doors open that God has not unlocked, to stop responding to every accusation, every insult, every whisper spoken against you. There is a peace that only comes when you stop fighting the wrong battles and start resting in the sovereignty of God. When Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and later thrown into prison by a false accusation, he didn't chase them down to argue or beg for justice. He stepped back. And what happened? God elevated him in due time, which was the chief. When the moment came for restoration, his brothers stood before him, not recognizing the very one they betrayed. And he had the power, but he also had the perspective, because when you step back, not only does God step in, was the chief, but he also changes your heart in the process. Stepping back is not disengagement. It is engagement with divine timing. It is alignment with heavenly strategy. It's in that quiet retreat that you realize you are not losing ground, you are gaining God. And when he shows up, he shows off his power. The sea parts, the stone rolls away, the chains fall, the mouths of lions are shut. He is the chief. But he doesn't need your panic, your anger, or your retaliation. He just needs your obedience. Stepping back is the gateway to letting God prove what he said he would do. It's not a step out. It's a step up into deeper trust. Silence is often misunderstood in our world today. We live in an age where everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to voice their opinion, correct every accusation, and post every thought. But there is a divine discipline, a holy restraint in silence. To stay silent in the face of accusation, betrayal, or provocation is not weakness. It is strength under control. It is spiritual maturity, wrapped dignity, and clothed in wisdom. The Bible tells us in Proverbs, even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue. That means your silence, in certain moments, can speak more powerfully than 1,000 carefully crafted words. It was the chief. It doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It means you're wise enough to know ooh when not to say it ope. There are moments when silence protects your peace. There are times when the Holy Spirit will whisper, "Say nothing. Say nothing," because he knows that your response won't be fruitful. It will be fleshly. He knows that the argument will drag you into a pit where no one wins. He knows that engaging will cost you energy, time, and spiritual focus that would be better spent in prayer and purpose. Staying silent is not losing. It is choosing not to fight battles that are beneath your calling. Consider Jesus standing before Pilate, the King of Kings, the creator of the universe, falsely accused, mocked, beaten, and yet he answered not a word. He did not plead his case. He did not retaliate. Why? Because he didn't need to. The truth was not something he needed to argue. It was something he embodied. His silence in that moment was not defeat. It was the highest demonstration of power. He was saying, "You do not control this moment. My Father does." Silence is not suppression. It is sanctification. It refines your heart. It teaches you to surrender your desire for vindication. It teaches you to die to self. When you stay silent in the storm, you train your soul to trust the one who speaks to the winds and the waves. Silence is a sanctuary where your emotions are brought under submission to the Spirit. It is a place where you learn that just because you can speak doesn't mean you should. When you are falsely accused, silence feels unfair. When you are misunderstood, silence feels suffocating. But when you know who holds your reputation, you don't have to rush to defend it. When you know the God who sees in secret, you don't need to shout in public. You can remain silent, not because you are weak, but because your confidence is not in people's opinions, it's in God's justice. Sometimes silence is your strategy. It confuses the enemy. It disarms your accuser. It reveals the insecurity of those who attack you. There's nothing more unsettling to someone trying to provoke you than a peaceful, unbothered spirit. When you don't take the bait, when you don't fire back, when you just walk away quietly, the enemy loses ground. Every moment you choose silence over reaction, you are sowing seeds of spiritual strength. The fruit may not be visible right away, but it's growing. God sees your restraint and He honors it. And there is a moment that comes in the life of every believer who has walked through rejection, betrayal, and misunderstanding. A moment when the very people who turned their backs on you, spoke against you, or doubted your calling, will look back and realize what they missed. It is not prideful to acknowledge this reality. It is simply the truth. There comes a time when the same people who discounted you will recognize the hand of God on your life. They will see the fruit that patience bore. They will come face to face with what they once overlooked. And yes, in many cases, they will beg, not just for your attention, but for your help, your forgiveness, your presence, your wisdom. But the calling here is not to rejoice in their return with arrogance. The calling is to remain unmoved by applause, unaffected by vindication, and anchored in grace. When they come back, and often they do, it should not find you with a bitter heart, waiting to say, "I told you so." It should find you so healed, so whole, so focused on God's glory that your only response is mercy. There's a reason God often allows us to be overlooked, pushed aside, or dishonored in our season of preparation. Because if everyone celebrated you early, you might never learn to depend on God alone. He hides you for a time, allows the rejection, and watches how you respond. Not because He delights in your pain, but because He is preparing a platform that your character must be able to stand on. The longer the preparation, the stronger the foundation. Think of David, anointed by God but ignored by his own family. When the prophet Samuel came looking for the next king, David wasn't even invited into the room. He was left in the fields. The world didn't see a king, they saw a shepherd boy, but God saw a man after His own heart. And in time, those was the chief. Those who had forgotten had to watch him rise. They had to watch the oil flow. They had to acknowledge the favor of the Lord. Yet was the chief. Yet David didn't return to them with anger. He didn't throw their rejection in their face. He stayed humble. He knew that elevation came not from people but from the Lord. And when the opportunity rose for him to take revenge, as it did with Saul, he chose honor over vindication. That is the heart God blesses. There's a dangerous trap ring to be proven right. The flesh craves vindication. It wants the last word, the final victory lap. But when your motive becomes being seen, you've lost sight of the one who sees you always. Let God write your story in such a way that your life becomes the evidence. You don't need to argue when your obedience has already answered every accusation. When they return, when they finally understand what you carried, what you endured, and what you refused to retaliate against, your posture must be one of grace. Because this journey was never about showing them who you are. It was always about showing them who God is through you. If they come back begging for what they once rejected, which was the chief, let them find you overflowing with the love and strength that only come from having walked with God in the shadows. Your silence spoke, your stepping back opened the way, and your refusal to seek revenge preserved the purity of your purpose. Trusting the process is one of the most challenging things you will ever be called to do, especially when it feels like everyone around you is advancing, being celebrated, promoted, while you remain hidden, misunderstood, or even forgotten. But the truth is this: the silence, The delay, which was the surety. They are not signs that God has overlooked you. They are evidence that He is working a deeper thing within you, something man cannot see and would not understand even if they tried. Man looks at the surface. Man is impressed by speed, by visibility, by numbers, by recognition. But God is never moved by the outer shell. He is not in a rush to showcase something that is not ready. He is not in the business of building platforms for people whose character has not yet been forged in the fire. God sees what man misses. He sees your heart in the midnight hour. He sees your obedience when no one is watching. He sees your tears behind closed doors. He sees the times you chose integrity over opportunity. And He is not unjust to forget the labor of love you have poured out in secret. There are things the chief God will allow you to walk through that are designed to shape you, not shame you. The people who criticize you now may never know what you've survived. The ones who dismiss your value may never witness the weight of your calling. But God sees, God knows, and God rewards in His time, not theirs. The process is not punishment. It is preparation. Joseph didn't go from dream to destiny overnight. He was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, lied about, and imprisoned. For years, it looked as if everything was moving in the opposite direction of the promise God had given him. But in all of that, God was working behind the scenes, aligning circumstances, building resilience, deepening trust. When Joseph was finally brought before Pharaoh, it wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was divine timing. The very skills he developed in obscurity were the same ones he used to govern a nation. And the very brothers who betrayed him had to come back and bow before him, not because Joseph sought power, but because he trusted the process. The process is where pride dies and purity is born. It is where you learn to depend on God when the applause fades. It is where you find out that your value isn't in a title, a platform, or public affirmation, but in your identity as a child of God. You may not understand why it's taking so long. You may not see the purpose in being passed over. But delay does not mean denial. Hidden does not mean forgotten. God is developing something eternal in you, and sometimes that means He has to shield you from premature exposure. The people around you may not see what you carry. They may mislabel you. They may underestimate your purpose. But there was the chief. Your opinions are not the foundation of your future. What matters is that the God who called you sees everything. He saw David when he was tending sheep. He saw Esther when she was just another orphan girl. He saw Moses when he was wandering in the wilderness. And He sees you now. Every moment in the process has meaning. Every quiet season has purpose. Every unseen act of faith is being recorded in heaven. God misses nothing. There is a great temptation in every human heart to chase the approval of people, to measure progress by applause, and to feel validated only when we are seen celebrated and supported by others. But the true victory of a believer is not found in being praised by man. It is found in being aligned with the timing and will of God. The applause of people may feel good in the moment, but it cannot sustain your purpose. It cannot guide you through dark valleys, and it certainly cannot replace the quiet assurance that comes from walking in obedience even when no one is watching. God's timing is sacred. It is not rushed, not pressured by outside forces, and not concerned with the pace of others. It moves according to a divine schedule that takes into account not only your destiny, but also your development. You may feel ready. You may even be desperate to step into the promise, but God sees what still needs to be refined. He knows the weight of the calling that lies ahead, and He will not release you into it before you are truly ready to carry it. Man's praise is often short-lived and shallow. Today they cheer, tomorrow they criticize. The same crowd that shouted Hosanna as Jesus entered Jerusalem later cried, "Crucify Him," in the same breath. That is the nature of human praise. It is unstable and unpredictable. But the timing of God is steady, intentional, and rooted in eternal wisdom. When God opens a door, no one can shut it. When He elevates a person, no amount of opposition can bring them down. And when He says it is time, everything begins to align in a way that human effort could never produce. There are seasons when it seems like no one sees the work you're doing, the prayers you're praying, the faithfulness you're walking in day after day. And it's in those seasons that your character is being forged. God is teaching you to be content with His approval. He is stripping away the addiction to validation. He is anchoring your soul in the quiet place where His voice becomes louder than the crowd's. If your motivation becomes the praise of man, you will live in constant disappointment. You'll strive, compare, and exhaust yourself trying to meet the expectations of people who don't even understand your purpose. Was the chief. But when your victory is rooted in God's timing, you don't panic when you're overlooked. You don't compete for attention. You don't manipulate situations to be seen. You walk in peace because you trust that when the moment is right, God will shine a light that no one can dim. Victory in God's eyes often looks different than what the world calls success. It may not come with fanfare. It may not bring a stage or spotlight, but it brings fulfillment, peace, and the unmistakable sense that you are right where He wants you to be. When you stop chasing praise and start pursuing purpose, you will find that your journey is not delayed. It is being divinely orchestrated. Every setback, every silence, every season of waiting is part of a greater tapestry being woven by unseen hands. What looks like a pause is often a preparation. What feels like being passed over is often God's way of saying, was the chief. Not yet, not because I've forgotten you, but because I love you too much to release you too soon.